Hello and welcome to another WeatherCast America Quickcast for Monday, May 19th, 2025. In this forecast, we're going to break down the continued severe weather sequence to start out the work week. That's going to last at least through the middle of this week, and then we'll take a little longer range look at the Memorial Day weekend for 2025. So starting out, here is the Storm Prediction Center's severe weather outlook for Monday, May 19th. And you can see overnight they've upgraded and expanded a moderate risk for parts of the Ozarks down into the Red River Valley, parts of southeastern Kansas, southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, and much of eastern Oklahoma, a small part of North Texas right along the Red River. That is in the moderate risk for all hazards this afternoon. We see an expanded enhanced risk that stretches from Wichita up through Kansas City into central Missouri around Columbia, Jefferson City, and then down through about West Plains, Missouri, into northern Arkansas, west of Little Rock, about into the areas around Russellville, and then down into the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. We also have a slight risk further north. That includes areas around Omaha, also further east around St. Louis, and then possibly some storms out ahead of the main system through the Tennessee Valley this afternoon. There's a slight risk that extends all the way down into western parts of South Carolina. And here you can see the enhanced risk for tornadoes today, stretching through much of western Missouri, all the way down into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Within that enhanced hatched area, we have a higher 15% significant tornado risk. That includes the I-35 corridor in Oklahoma, much of eastern Oklahoma into northwest Arkansas and southwest Missouri. And this is where we're going to see, I think, the bullseye of severe weather this afternoon. There is a larger risk area. It's not zero all the way through St. Louis and all the way up to about Sioux City on the Missouri River, and then also down into areas in the hill country of Texas. So keep in mind there is a larger non-zero tornado risk, but I think we're going to see that focus there in the central states. And very similar, we see the larger wind risk. A significant wind risk is possible here in Missouri, back into Kansas and Oklahoma and into northwest Arkansas. Could have some hurricane-forced winds, especially with some of the outflow and downbursts in these storms. Looks like we're going to have a kind of a messy storm mode with possibilities of having individual supercells, clusters of storms, and also convective systems working across this region. So with the mix of storm modes, that's going to bring a lot of the all hazards risk together in this area. And here's a look at our hail risk. Significant hail possible, stretching all the way up to Sioux City, all the way down through western Iowa, southeast parts of Nebraska, and much of eastern Kansas and western Missouri, down into eastern Oklahoma, and all the way down to the hill country of Texas. You can see some of that largest hail risk areas like Bartlesville, Shawnee, Fort Smith, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, up into the Joplin area in Missouri. That could be some significant large hail. And also large hail possible from Dallas-Fort Worth all the way up to Kansas City, Springfield, Jefferson City, Wichita, Topeka. So a lot of metro areas could see some larger hail today, so make sure we protect those cars. You're getting home this afternoon, tuck them into those carports and garages if you can. Could see some significant damage if we get a hailstorm working through some of these metro areas. Tomorrow this system works east. It's not going to be quite as punchy. The low pressure will weaken a little bit after it deepens today. The most significant severe weather looks like it's going to be tomorrow afternoon and evening across portions of the Tennessee Valley, especially southwest Kentucky, western and middle Tennessee, and then into northern portions of Alabama and Mississippi. I think this is where our greatest tornado threat is likely here in the Tennessee Valley tomorrow. That includes locations like Memphis, Jackson, Tennessee, Clarksville, Nashville, Huntsville, Florence, Birmingham, just to the west of Birmingham especially, and then a larger slight risk. That includes areas from St. Louis and southern Illinois all the way near Bloomington, across to Indianapolis, down through Cincinnati, Maysville, including parts of eastern Kentucky that got hit really hard with severe weather the other day, all the way down through the Birmingham, Jackson, Mississippi, and even into northeast Louisiana, and also into eastern Arkansas around Pine Bluff up to Jonesboro. Within that risk area, you can see there is a hatched 10% risk for tornadoes. That stretches through that northern Mississippi, northern Alabama area, all the way up into western Kentucky, including areas like a big metro area like Nashville, Memphis, could be under the gun for chances for tornadoes tomorrow. And that same area is under the gun for a elevated wind risk tomorrow, as well as a large area of potential larger hail, stretching from Illinois all the way down into northern portions of Louisiana. And as that system works east, it will spark some chances of severe weather, especially in the mid-Atlantic, all the way down into coastal Georgia. This would be on Wednesday before that system pushes out. And now taking a look at the severe weather chances a little closer, here is the HRRR model one of our latest runs, and we're going to see those storms develop here in the afternoon, especially along and ahead of a dry line cold front setup eastern Kansas into areas here in Missouri around Kansas City. Also watching a cluster of storms develop out ahead of the main complex. That would be in eastern Oklahoma and northwest Arkansas. We can already see the HRRR develops a few supercells along the dry line in Oklahoma, and putting it into motion further into the evening, we can see clusters, rounds of thunderstorms. It's not going to be a one and done. If a storm moves through your particular area, there may be another round of severe weather behind that, so it's not going to just clear out the atmosphere. But we can see here possibility of some convective systems working across Missouri. And then we have to watch that dry line setup right along the I-35 from Wichita all the way down into Oklahoma here, especially central Oklahoma, northern Texas. That's where we could see some supercells really developing here. And again, out ahead, we could have some severe weather supercells with hail and tornado chances even out here into northwest Arkansas, northeast Oklahoma, out ahead of that main convection developing along the dry line. As we go further out into the evening, we can really see the models hinting at some convective systems developing, and even a squall line down here working into western Arkansas. Those could bring the elevated chances for damaging wind, hail, and also some quick spin-up tornadoes continuing into the evening and into overnight. And as that works overnight, we can also see a large batch of heavy rain. This could be affecting areas like St. Louis into southern Illinois here, so keep an eye on that. Could also still have a wind risk and some hail risk in this cluster of storms as it works to the east. I want to highlight some differences here. This is the HRRR run at 22Z. I think it does a pretty good job. We can see a cluster of storms developing here in northern Missouri. Also possibility of some supercells developing here in northeast Kansas that could affect the Kansas City area. You can also see kind of a ragged bunch of storms, but could bring all hazards down here into southwest Missouri, northern Arkansas, and eastern Oklahoma. But they also have to watch here on the HRRR developing an arc of supercells along that I-35 corridor in areas in northern Oklahoma, around Ponca City, over towards Bartlesville, and then down along the I-35 through OKC, down into the Red River Valley. So I think this model does a pretty good job depicting the mixed storm modes that we're going to have, as well as some of that all-hazard threat. Looking at one of our other convective allowing models, I think the NAM is kind of underdoing some of this convection here. The NAM kind of indicates more of a messy setup here into Missouri, so it's kind of hard to see what's going on. I think it also underconvects the dry line setup. It does bring some stronger storms here along the Red River, so that is one thing to focus on. I think it brings a few more storms, possibly supercells, deeper into North Texas, so that could be something to look at. But overall, I think the NAM is maybe underdoing things a little bit. On the reverse side, we have that experimental Rufus model, the RRFS model. It does a pretty good job, like the HRRR, really focusing some attention towards the dry line. But the Rufus does seem to over-convect sometimes, but we can see it does hint at some supercells, possibly individual, possibly a cluster of supercells working its way along the I-35 corridor down here in Oklahoma. We can see kind of a messier storm mode that it's indicating in Missouri. That could be a mix of all hazards of damaging wind, hail, and embedded tornadoes, especially clusters of possible supercells. It's interesting here, it convects along the dry line a little bit heavier into Kansas, even up into areas here in southeast parts of Nebraska. So, and definitely stay weather aware, because we could have significant weather even reaching up into that Missouri Valley. The HRRR does show some convection there, still in southeast Nebraska, so that could be something that aligns well there between the Rufus and the HRRR. Looking tomorrow, we can pick up those storms. This is around 1 or 2 a.m. An arc of storms. Some of those could be still severe in Arkansas especially, and then a damaging wind threat potentially with a bow echo working through eastern Missouri. Convection is going to continue it on through the morning. You can see new development here in northeast Arkansas into western parts of Tennessee. That could continue through the afternoon as a bit of its own convective system. Before we look back into areas here in the Ohio and mid-Mississippi valleys for some new convection here, that's going to develop tomorrow afternoon. The HRRR puts some severe risk a little bit further north, so we do have to look. I think this is under a slight risk tomorrow. We do have to keep an eye on areas here in southern Illinois that could pose a severe risk there. And then all the way down in here, we can see the HRRR by tomorrow afternoon into the evening, developing storms along the Mississippi River in western Kentucky, all the way down through western Tennessee. And as we put this into motion by tomorrow evening, we can see, I think that best chance for an all hazards threat is going to be south central Kentucky, all the way through middle and western Tennessee, and then down into northern parts of Alabama and Mississippi. And that's where I think the storms do have the potential for the highest chance of all hazards. We could see also a bit of a convective system or squall line working its way through parts of the Ohio Valley. So we'll keep an eye on some severe weather tomorrow evening in parts of Illinois and Indiana. And that continues into the overnight on Tuesday into early morning hours on Wednesday. We should see the storms die out over the Appalachians with some cooler air over the Appalachian Mountains. Potential for some severe weather still ongoing, some stronger storms at least ongoing into central parts of Alabama and also into northern parts of Georgia. Storms should weaken as they get into the morning on Wednesday. So let's look at the GFS model, and this will show us some of that longer range forecast. We can see that low pressure and that storm system working through the Midwest today and tomorrow here in the central states, pushing into the mid-Mississippi, Tennessee, and Ohio valleys on Tuesday. And then those storm chances continuing, especially rain and storms here on the East Coast for Wednesday. And by Thursday, that storm system kind of weakens, but we do see that troughing builds in for Thursday. That's going to keep a little bit of a northwest flow here, keep some showers and cooler temperatures around here in the Northeast. But it looks like into the weekend, again, we could see some reinforcing troughing. That's going to keep the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic a little cooler and then a little bit wetter. Probably not all day rain, but some showers possible on Friday. And by next weekend here on Saturday, we can see there's going to be some ridging here in the west, troughing in the east. Not a super conducive setup for severe weather. We may say a little bit of a system trying to ride along that ridge that could create some showers and storms here in the northern Rockies into the northern plains. So we'll watch out for that. We can see also still showers continuing here, a little bit lighter and less concentrated. There are some indications of some wet weather there on the East Coast, even into the weekend. Overall, for a Memorial Day weekend, it does look like things are going to stay relatively calm. Things could change as we get a little bit closer, but in general, this northwest flow isn't very conducive for severe weather. We'll have to watch a little bit again on Monday. There could be some storms here in the central plains up into the Ohio Valley, with some possibilities of some stronger storms here along the Red River. But for the most part, it looks like the Memorial Day weekend is going to stay fairly quiet. A cooler pattern in the northeast, especially around that high pressure to the north, and then also mostly a ridge pattern here in the west. That's going to continue to keep the west pretty hot, especially Texas into the Four Corners over to California. And we can see that a little bit with the temperatures here. This is the temperature outlook for Monday on Memorial Day weekend, the May 26th. Keeps the 90s pushed down here into the Gulf Coast states from Louisiana over towards possibly western parts of South Carolina. But then once we get up into the East Coast, we can see it's going to be temperate. It's 70s and 60s for high temperatures. Not exactly swimming weather at the beach. Well, it's going to be about 70 here on the Jersey Shore. Personally, for me, I like to be around at least in the 80s. So I think down here could be a little bit better beach weather here into Carolinas. And then Florida is going to continue to be hot here with mid-90s showing up on Memorial Day weekend. And those 90s pushing areas here around Atlanta over towards Jackson, Mississippi, the I-20 corridor. And then pushing 100 is potential here still in Texas into the mid to upper 90s in the desert Southwest. We see those cooler temperatures to the north in the 50s and 60s in much of the lower Great Lakes. Even some cooler temperatures a little closer to upper 40s, low 50s in northern parts of Wisconsin, in much of Minnesota, and into the Dakotas on Memorial Day. And then just taking a look at the GFS, this is on the 500 millibar, the jet stream level winds. We can again see that trough digging in here. That's going to create the severe weather today. And then looking into tomorrow, we can see that low still up here in the high plains. It does kind of broaden out a little bit. And then that pattern stretches out, that low kind of degrades. We see the general troughing pattern dig in here on the East Coast for Wednesday, and a bit of a northwest flow pattern. That, again, could spark some severe weather here into the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas, maybe down into coastal Georgia. But that pattern isn't as conducive for tornadic development. It could bring a little higher chances of damaging wind and some hail into this area. And going into Memorial Day, we can see that ridging here in the west, troughing generally in the east. That's going to keep things a little bit cooler and a little bit damper. We can also see that other system that we mentioned could bring some storms into the central states here on Memorial Day weekend, but that is a positively tilted trough. Again, not as conducive for severe weather development, although there just could be some just based on the clash between the warm and the cooler air masses. At least right now, it does not look like a significant severe weather maker on Memorial Day. And we'll continue to watch that into the week after Memorial Day here to kind of dig in, reinforce troughing on the East Coast. Looking a little further out, this could change. This is a little longer out. But we see generally towards the end of the month, that pattern does seem to hold. We can see generally there's going to be ridging here in the west, and then also we can see troughing still here in the east coast. Generally, that pattern does not support a lot of larger scale severe weather events. Some of the models are starting to hint at a quieter period starting over Memorial Day weekend and leading into the following week, the last week of May, into possibly even in the start of June. Here in June, the pattern may start to switch around. We start to see a little bit more of an indication of troughing digging back into the west and ridging here. As that ridge comes out of the west and works its way east, that's going to create some hot temperatures here to start June in the eastern 2/3 of the country. But once we see troughing on the west and ridging in the east, especially in springtime, that could also be a hint of eventually a new system working into the plains by the early part of June. So we'll keep an eye on that. We have a lot of time to refine those model runs and refine the forecasts. But looking out, it does look like we might go through a little bit of a quieter period, which I think is a much needed period after we've seen a really active weather pattern the last week or so with a number of significant severe weather events. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you for joining us on WeatherCast USA. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click that bell icon to get notifications when we go live. As we're in the peak of severe weather season, it's important to have multiple ways to get warnings, and we will be live covering that ongoing severe weather sequence this week and continuing with forecast videos even when it gets a little quieter